Mike has single-handedly, other than Arm & Hammer and Earl Sweatshirt, been the most requested artist that you guys have asked me to do a lyrical breakdown on. And just like with the review of Beware the Monkey, it took me a long time to understand how to approach him. I've grown to love his work, but I still can't put my finger on why sometimes. I feel like his music, while really great, is incredibly straightforward, so I really had to sit back and think, why do we all connect so much with Mike? I realized through multiple listens of multiple albums, Mike is a deceptively good rapper, like a really good rapper. And I think this is where we can learn the most from him, because like I said, I think lyrically, it's pretty straightforward. But he uses this to his benefit by how much of an emphasis he puts on fundamentals in his performance. So let's start first with his flow. Mike's flow is like incredible. Like, it's so good that I didn't even realize it's the main reason why I love his stuff. And this is because he picks flows that are perfectly calibrated to the instrumental, and then once he has them, he doesn't let up until the end of the verse. He doesn't change flows very often. He's not stopping and starting, he just hits the pocket immediately and keeps you there. They're typically mid-tempo flows, they're not meant to steal the show, they're really just meant to fit with the vibe. But that fit is so seamless that I feel it actually carries a lot of his songs. Like, it is absolutely insane how much you can get away with when you have a really sturdy flow. And it doesn't matter what instrumental he goes on. Like, take for example the bright and kind of upbeat soul sample and horns on No Curse Lifted, or the ornate string instrumentation and arrangement on One More, or the slow syrupy, almost like ambient wave of sound that creates the beat for What Can I Do. Mike on all of these tracks just gets right in the pocket like a drummer would, and I swear, when you listen to his stuff more closely, you can tell how much consideration he puts into how the rhythm of his words interacts with every part of the rest of the instrumental. And just like with every fundamental, it's sort of an obvious point. Like, yes, flow is important, right? But what so many rappers do, and I literally do this all the time, is I underthink the flow by overthinking it. We try to fit so many words into one line, or overcomplicate the flow by having lots of rhythmic switch-ups and changes, and like, look, we all want to be Jid, right? But most of us, when we're starting out, won't be able to have a complex flow that also meets the needs of every other part of the instrumentation, especially if you're going with drumless or messing with soul chops like Mike is on a lot of his tracks. And so when I say we underthink our flows, right? What I mean is we underestimate how much impact our flow has on the other very important parts of the instrumentation, like the rhythm of the melody, the counter rhythm if there is one, and then obviously the beat, right? When you're picking out the instrumental that you're going to rap over, I'd suggest spending more time than you think is necessary on the flow, even if it's just mumbling the words until you find a rhythm that really gets you in the pocket. Like, dude, go listen to Century. Mike murders that feature. In my opinion, solely due to the flow that he takes. I love Earl's contribution to that track. I think Mike blows him out of the water because I think the flow matches so much better with the rhythm of the instrumental. Another fundamental that I want to get into when it comes to his performance is his delivery. His delivery is incredibly pronounced, and you can tell how much focus he puts on projecting his voice and placing himself at the center of any track. It doesn't matter what the tempo of the track is, what's going on in the instrumental, his volume is always incredibly consistent, which you would think shouldn't be an issue in rap, but it absolutely is, especially in this lane of underground hip-hop that he's in. The more complicated the instrumental gets, and the more complex the lyrics, the harder it is to keep track of the simple things like vocal presence and tone, which is a huge part of why Mike sounds so great on every track. His rhyme scheme almost always opts for exact, and I mean only exact rhymes, which is totally counter to what someone like Earl messes with these days, someone like Arm & Hammer, and the benefit of this is that he can go even harder on delivery and flow and vocal presence because what he's rapping is just a lot easier to rap. Like, that's the other thing, if you're a newer writer, that I think can really be taken from kind of Mike's lyrical style. When you're starting out rapping, just rap things that are easy to rap, and learn how to do that incredibly well. If you're a singer, sing things that are easy to sing. Just get those fundamentals airtight. And if you do that, people will listen to the things that you're putting out because they're so structurally sound, and you're going to gain confidence from that repetition as well. Because that's another thing that's so important about Mike's delivery and about him as a performer, is that he's incredibly confident on the mic. If you are struggling with confidence, I think Mike is the perfect rapper to study and listen to. And I mean seriously, like, I say this with love, but I think most of his verses, when it comes to storytelling, rhyming, etc., it's really nothing crazy. But I don't think he's trying to make it crazy or have it be anything other than his perspective and what's directly going on in his life and what's going on in his mind. I mentioned this in a recent video, like some people, they pick 1 or 2 topics and they just master writing about them with a level of intensity that never gets old. Mike is one of those writers. And the benefit of this approach is that the less you experiment, the more confidence you're likely to gain because you know that style inside and out. So if you find a niche or a flow that works for you and you stick to it throughout an entire song, you don't go crazy with words or rhymes or anything, and instead just keep your energy and intensity up, you've got the chance to have a good or potentially great song on your hands, obviously depending on your performance and the instrumental and the mixing and all that. But again, what I'm trying to say here is that you'll be shocked at how much really solid delivery and flow will take you. And that leads me to the last fundamental that I want to talk about when it comes to Mike's writing style. I think Mike is a great example of how lyrics do not need to be entertaining. Let me repeat that. Lyrics do not need to be entertaining. It's the same line of thought as Sam Esmail saying, "Plot doesn't matter, characters do." Let me explain this a little bit more. One thing I think that new writers do, and I'm incredibly guilty of this, is trying to emulate in song how a personal experience makes you feel in the moment. And the fact is, this doesn't always work out. An experience that happened to you may actually not be all that interesting to outsiders, and that's completely okay. Mike is constantly talking about his personal life, his experiences, how his art is directly tied to his relationship with his mom, tons of things that have absolutely nothing to do with us. We might be interested to a degree, but I mean, there's no way we could care about it as much as Mike does. They're entirely subjective things that he's passionate about, but he's completely okay with us not being able to access that level of passion. And I think this is evident in his word choice and his delivery and the presentation of his songs. He's not trying to extrapolate the feeling that he has towards these tracks and deliver it to us in the exact same way because of how straightforward his lyrics are. And I think this is a really great choice because it circumvents melodrama and things coming off as a little over the top or even, God forbid, cringe, right? And this is a criticism that a lot of new writers get, and this is one that's really tough to hear. This idea that the story that you've presented is not as compelling as you think it is. Or another one, which I think even cuts deeper, this emotion doesn't feel earned. This track doesn't feel earned. I don't feel what you're putting out. But where I think some of that criticism stems from is, again, delivery, word choice, and song presentation. If there's like an incongruency with the vibe of the instrumental and your delivery and what you're actually saying, that's when people are going to say, this isn't earned. This grand instrumentation or this really intense delivery where, you know, things are supposed to be taken so seriously, but what you're talking about is actually not that interesting, right? It's not going to feel earned. But with Mike, that rarely ever happens. He doesn't try to force anything. Because think about it. If you're like Mike and you're talking about your upbringing, your mental state, how you love your family, how you value your relationships, if you're just talking about a lot of personal stuff, how many crazy double entendres can you really think of? How many uplifting, inspiring, kind of like coming of self tracks can you drop? It's like the coach who always gives the same emotional pregame speech before a game. After a while, that approach just isn't gonna work unless you're like Deion Sanders or something. So say you have a story that you want to tell that is important to you, but to other people, it's not the craziest thing that ever happened. Like say you broke up with a partner, or you want to talk about family dynamics, or I don't know, you need a job and you want to rap about how you need a job. You want to write about this, but you're not interested in tying it into some overarching conceptual narrative that's reflective of society and all that kind of stuff. If that's your goal and you just want to talk about what's up with you, then just talk about what's up with you. With a lot of Mike's verses, you can clearly hear the passion, but it's pretty straightforward. But that's a deliberate choice that's meant to circumvent that whole like awkward thing of like, oh, this doesn't feel earned, right? He's not trying to make it the greatest story of all time. He's just talking about what's going on with him. And so if you do that, and you pair it with a really solid flow, really tight delivery, and just the vibe of the track is just completely cohesive, you'll be surprised at how far that alone gets you. And it's incredibly tricky because what you'll find sometimes is that what moves you does not move others. And sometimes what you say in passing will stop someone else in their tracks. You never know. But that's the beauty of subjectivity, so just lean into it. And if you decide you want to craft a structurally engaging story that involves other people or bigger topics outside of your immediate life, go for it. But either way, just make sure that vibe is airtight all the way around. From instrumental to performance to word choice to delivery, make it all make sense and ride that wave until something does it. Because that's exactly what Mike does, and he does it incredibly well. Until next time, this has been Unknown Reviews. It's a lyrical breakdown. Not really, but kind of. And I will see you next time. Have a good one.